On today's episode, we have Robert Yule. His spirit name is Gentle Rain, and he is a traditional healer. Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the episode. Cool.
Sure. So, Robert, tell me what it is you do.
Okay, so I am a traditional healer, and I was trained in the Igqriha tradition, which is different kind of to the Sangomas. So we are the traditional doctors, the herbalists, whereas the Sangomas are more the diviners, the seers. Although these days, things have got a little bit looser and people are kind of moving away from the very distinct classification of like the harsh tradition, like you're either this or you're this. There's more of an eclectic approach, I think, that is happening. Well, certainly in my training, there was a bit of an eclectic approach. Whatever works, whatever your ancestors want to come through, is cool. Let it come through. So some of my line are kind of Sangomas as well, because they are diviners, they're seers. The only difference really, I think, is, strictly speaking, the Igqriha, they are the birth people, and Sangomas are the kind of the death principle people. So they're the fire, we're the water. They dance with 3-step, we dance with the 2-step. So there are subtle differences in the traditions, but I think, it's everything is becoming very blurred these days. So anyway, that's a long explanation for saying I'm a traditional healer.
That's perfect. What did your training involve?
Okay, so my training was a long series of ceremonial steps to move through particular phases in the initiatory process. So we started with the calling of the ancestors, where we wear white and we discover what our medicine is, the medicine of the home, which is ubalao. And we stir that with a forked stick, which I have around here somewhere, usually made of wild olive. And we stir it in a billy can, which I also have around here somewhere, but in the back. And in that medicine, we put the first medicine that we would get in that particular phase. So in the white phase, when you start with the call of the ancestors, you'll get the ancestral medicine, which is just the plain ubalao. And then then the next process that we go through is the water ceremony, where we are kind of essentially baptized. We go to the water and we are introduced to the ancestors of the water, the ancestors of the ocean. And we are told that we're all one. And a lot of beautiful things happen then in that process. So it's not just that we experience the ceremony and that's it, life goes on. There's a whole process behind the scenes that it kickstarts. So we start having to deal with our emotions more. We start having to deal with the water principle of our lives because we are initiated into that. And we are initiated into the fact that we are all one, right? We're all in this primordial soup. So that's what the ancestors of the water want to teach us, that that's where life came from. That's where it is. So from there, we then moved to a place where there is a more boundaried approach to life. So we are then introduced to the forest ancestors, the forest spirits. And we go where we went to the water at dawn, we go to the forest at dusk. Simply because it's easier to see the light in the trees and it's a beautiful time of day. And that's kind of when the forest really comes alive, And we're introduced to the forest of life, to community. We're all part of that big, huge community. And we're introduced to the concept of how we have mycelium running between us, and we have intercommunication between us. And although we are people, two-legged people, four-legged people are still connected to us in some way. And so are the winged beings and the crawling beings and the slithering beings and flying beings, you know, because they're all connected by this beautiful web of life. So also we're introduced to the fact that each person is an individual in that primordial soup. So before we were all swimming around, and we're all one, and we're all kind of this, you know, mash of things. But now we're starting to get boundaries. We're starting to realize who we are. We're starting to stand up. And there's also a whole process of moving from kneeling to standing tall. And that is also woven into that whole process. So we move on to then the third process, which is the fire. And that is where we experience the fire of life. So in a lot of cultures and in a lot of traditions, that involves sacrifice. And in each step, usually there is a sacrifice. So my line don't sacrifice. Well, we don't sacrifice other beings, we sacrifice ourselves. So we make it uncomfortable for ourselves. We make it difficult, you know, because we have to give up something in order to get benefit from this kind of thing. You know, and then that's a whole another debate about whether it's legitimate or not. You know, there's a whole thing about that. But anyway, so in the fire process, we become the fire. We sit by the fire and we learn about the fire of digestion, fire of life, what gives everything life, how to sacrifice that which we love desperately and allow that to move on. So we then find a place in ourselves where that eternal fire stays with us and our consciousness becomes inverted. We become the flame. We become the fire. So we take on an angelic kind of consciousness where instead of looking from the inside out, we look from the outside in. So we experience life from another person's perspective, from another being's perspective, looking in how we're impacting our lives on them and looking at it from their perspective. So we're looking through their eyes at us, if that makes any sense. So we work through the fire, the death principle of that. And then it moves again to the life process where we now are reimagining all of those in a much more profound way, because we've experienced what death and the rebirth is like. And we are now experiencing what each of the aspects of that medicine wheel are from a death perspective. So what is the death of water look like? What does the death of the forest look like? What does the death of fire look like? You know, and then we move into what does the air of those aspects look like? And then what does the forest of the forest look like? You know, what does the forest of water look like? And so it goes, it just spirals. So we're always learning. The official end of your training is when you reach the fire principle, but that's kind of like an initiation, really. You get thrown out into the world and it becomes part of becoming the hero, you know, you're starting the hero's journey again, where you've just been knighted you've got all of these accolades, da, 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 you get your sword and your shield and all of that kind of stuff. And you get thrown out into the deep, deep, dark forest. And you are told, right, go for it. And the thing is, you can't really follow anyone's path, you know. It's because it's always going to lead back to them. You have to cut through the deepest dark forest yourself. You have to find your own path. You have to find your own way. And a lot of people get really lost and really distraught at the end of their training, because essentially we become our teachers, you know, those people who are nearest and guide us. But actually, we need to step out of that. We need to step onto our own path, our own darkness, and move through the forest in a way where we now can make friends with the critters and the lions and tigers and bears and all of that in the forest, you know? Essentially, we're making friends with ourselves, with our dark side, with all the dark beings, everybody that you encounter on this path. You know, the dragons of greed, but also the dragons of beauty and of protection. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful journey, and it continues throughout our life. So once we initiate, we never really stop initiating. The ancestors still call. Even many, many years later, they call us back to the first medicine. Like, what is it that you need to learn now? Because in hindsight, there's much more wisdom available to us through the perspective of the ancestors, through this perspective of hindsight. And essentially, that's our training.
What are some differences between African traditional healing and European paganism?
So that's a very interesting question. And I think that has to do with the European paganism has to do with the worship of nature and of I use worship loosely. It is the connection with nature, becoming connected with all of the nature spirits and becoming one with everybody. It's also the same in a lot of ways. It is the hero's journey. You know, a lot of the European paganism has to do with Celtic law, and Celtic law is heavily focused on the Grail quest. Although that's been Christianized a lot, the Grail quest was about exactly what I spoke about earlier, cutting through the dark forest, finding the Grail within yourself. And so both traditions have to, I suppose they deal with essentially coming back to yourself and finding a way to dance in nature, find your place in nature. What is it echoing to you? What is it saying? How are you able to be a custodian of this beautiful planet? How are you to heal yourself and your family and those around you by connecting fully with Mother Earth and with all the nature spirits? So, you know, I suppose in European paganism, you have deities, you've got the woodland sprites, you've got the overarching Cernunnos, Herne, the other, you know, all the other names that he has, and you have the Mother Goddess, Mother Earth. In African culture, you have the same thing, although not specifically named as such. You are part of nature. So I think it all comes down to the connection that we have to Mother Earth, and how we can express that in a beautiful way.
Is there any connection between Greek and Roman mythology and Celtic paganism?
That's a difficult question. um, I guess there is, in the way that the stories are the same. Um, they have the overarching theme. They have um, the moralistic, the virtuous, and the, I suppose, the moral insight behind them. They're teaching you myth. They're teaching you how to live in a specific way, how to um, navigate through challenges in life. So they're giving you examples to live by. Some of them, um, you know, they teach you how to navigate through difficult times. So they use stories like Ariadne's thread, you know, and Theseus walking through the labyrinth. So in order for him to escape the Minotaur, he follows the red thread home. And that is classic hero's journey, you know. And in Celtic myth, you have exactly the same thing, you know, although slightly more elaborate. You have, I think, I would argue, a much richer storytelling culture in the Celtic myths, um, because it's all very expressive, and you have these incredible chases where these beings turn into trout, and then they turn into deer, and they turn into um, all sorts of other beings, only to be swallowed and then reborn to become a prophet. Um, and that is the same thing, you know. If you follow the thread of philosophy, if you follow the thread of experience in the mysteries, you will come to the place where you will escape the mundane life and become enlightened in your own view of the gods and the world and everything around you. So I think that is probably the overarching message. Um, so I would say, you know, not too hugely clued up on specifics around Celtic, Roman, and Greek myths, and then judging whether they are the same or different. I think the overarching themes are the same, and the morality that they teach, you know, the virtues that they teach are in a lot of ways similar.
What drew you to healing in the first place?
I I was sick, and I had a very difficult childhood, and um, my life growing up was difficult, and I went to many healers to try and find a way through to navigate through this, and or through my illness, you know, and all of them said, "Hey, no, you've been chosen. You've got the calling. You're sick. You know, you need to go for training, and um, you need to sort this thing out. You need to heal yourself because you are no use to anybody." So, being a white boy in Zimbabwe, I didn't really identify with Shona culture. I was not very clued up on the mythical ideology of Shona culture. I had an idea of Shona customs because we were exposed to it through school and through my friends and through growing up. And, you know, eventually it got to a point where I got so sick that I had to do something. And I went for help. And that is when I started healing myself. So I heal, or I help heal people from my experience of that particular illness and how I overcame it. And then through all the patients that I've had, I help heal people through my experience with them and how they got better and what they did to help them. But essentially, it all started with me. It all started with me healing myself first, and then it moved on to helping healing other people. I guess that's the way it starts. You start with yourself first. You fix yourself, make sure that you're okay to be able to handle the voltage that comes through. And then once you're able to handle the voltage, then you're able to kind of pass it on and to help people with their light and their darkness as well. So that's how it all started for me.
What is earth magic?
Earth magic is natural magic. It is it's engaging the earth spirits, ancestors of the earth, so also the stone people and the waters underneath the earth. It's also engaging many of the kind of earth deities and the earth spirits who inhabit that land, and asking them for favors, really, befriending them and asking them, hey, can you fix this? Can you do that? Can you help me out here? If they feel benevolent, or if they feel friendly towards you, then yes, they will help. Otherwise, it'll be a flat no, forget it. Sorry. Next.
What's the best way to translate the idea of earth magic to the modern world? So what's the best way to explain it?
So for me, the best way to explain earth magic has always been to help people experience it. You can't really explain what earth magic is. You can't really explain that feeling of being connected to Mother Earth or fixing a crack in a piece of land, without actually experiencing the disconnect between two pieces of land, or the feeling when there is an earth elemental around, when one of those beings decides to make themselves known in a good or a bad way. So it's always about experience, I think. So I try to help people to experience it as much as possible, because for me, earth healing and earth magic and all of that stuff is about getting down and dirty, getting your feet wet, putting your feet and your hands in the mud, and really experiencing the magic of this place, this Eden that we live in. Such a beautiful, amazing, incredible place. And people tend to see a very limited view of it. So they see, a piece of land with a couple of trees on it and lots of weeds, and the lawn needs mowing, but they don't feel that connection. And I think it's the feeling which is missing. So my mission is to help people to feel a connection to Mother Earth, to feel the connection to our brothers and sisters that we can see and can't see. I think the best way would be through experiential ceremonies and workshops where you kind of get involved in clay and walking, forest bathing, and hikes and swims in beautiful mountain pools and things like that. I think that's the best way.
What are some common blockages that prevent a person from experiencing everything you just described?
The intellect, wanting to understand everything, wanting to know everything, intellectualizing, and not really feeling here. So one of the biggest things that I come across pretty much every time I do a healing with someone is that they have a disconnect with Mother Earth. So when I did my forest ceremony, the tree said to me, "How can you possibly be any good to anybody if you are not rooted in the ground. And they were laughing at us. They were saying, how can you even live? How are you guys alive? Because your roots have been cut off. You have no roots. You float miles above the firmament, and you don't even connect. Why are you even here? You know? So that stuck with me, and it has become one of my core practices. So the first thing I'll do is I'll ground someone. I'll get them to get on their knees and imagine that the earth is like this beautiful, clear crystal pool. And I get them to swing their legs down into the Mother Earth, kind of knee deep. And just underneath there, when they connect to Mother Earth, there's this beautiful ball of light. So I get them to try and imagine this beautiful ball of light that starts pulsating and growing when they connect. And what that does is that opens them up to the mana, which is the vitality of Mother Earth. So Mother Earth begins to then feed us. And that is our root ball, actually. And our roots grow around that. And from that, our tree of life, which is our middle line, and these energy centers are over here and above, those begin to pulsate and grow, and they become stronger. And as a result, we then become centered in our past, which is behind us, and then in our future, which is in front of us, in our masculine and our feminine. So our masculine is on our right side and our feminine's on our left side. So we then exist right on the axis mundi. So the center of our universe. Okay. So we then become the tree of life. We then plant the roots and we start growing with fruit, the garden of pomegranates, as Israel Gadi calls it. And we then are able to benefit from the life energy that Mother Earth gives us. And we're able to then connect more fully to the vitality of life. And we're able to dance in this beautiful place that we live in, rather than being bogged down and being fettered and have our weight on our shoulders, and we kind of walk around feeling like Atlas, and everything is just drudgery and terrible. This way we can skip through life and we can enjoy it. And we're able to deal with life on life's terms that way. Because life's not always beautiful, but it always bears fruit. Some of that fruit's bitter, some of it's really sweet. But we learn to appreciate it. When we're like that, we are in the center of it all. We say yes to life, actually. The divine feminine. We say yes to the divine feminine, which is the symbolism of life. So we're able to then move on and become more connected and more centered in the greater aspect of the world. So the brothers and sisters that surround us then become part of our cosmology as well. And their connections then connect with us. So the mycelium that I spoke of earlier, that then begins to grow between each of us. And we then cultivate a place called community. And we develop a community where we are interdependent. We're independent, but we're also interdependent. We depend on other people for community. So we ask for help when we need it. And we're also able to set healthy boundaries. So when you don't have any of that flowing and you have all of those blockages, that's when you start having personal issues, schizophrenics and people of that ilk. They have very blocked centers. It's usually the solar plexus and the sacral, so they're in survival mode. They also have another entity that has entered their field and is talking to them the whole time. And there's like a whole bunch of other voices in there that are becoming florid. So there's no trust in self. There's no sense of identity. Idealism goes out the window, and there's a sense of being lost and confused, and able to rely on yourself. And that sets you up to a whole different other story as well. So you get predated by other things. Other things feed off you. These entities or these diseases that we end up having all come from essentially an imbalance of our psyche, our spiritual self that is not connected and grounded. So that's how I see disease. So it's very, very important for people to connect to Mother Earth. That's why I make such a big deal out of it.
Speaking of energy centers, have you found the Eastern traditions like Buddhism and the Vedic traditions to be useful?
Absolutely. Absolutely integral. They're all incredibly wise traditions, and there are a lot of echoes within other traditions as well. So, if you're a Buddhist, okay, and you see, or you are in the Vedic tradition and you see the energy centers, you're psychic and you see these energy centers. If you become pagan, you're not going to not see those energy centers anymore. They're still going to be there. That's still part of our anatomy. They give us the clues. They give us the stepping stones to work with all of these things. And it's a beautiful tradition that has so much insight, so much wisdom. It's unbelievable. The Vedas are incredible. And Buddhist thought is also absolutely incredible. How it helps to deal with life on life's terms. And the teachings are they're immaculate. They have an answer for everything, and they answer in such a very, very simple, profound way. I've found the Buddhist tradition extremely helpful. And it helps to kind of teach this stuff, to teach about connection and to, about Mother Earth, and how we are the center of a universe, our universe, and how we are becoming enlightened through the process of eliminating denser parts of ourselves, kind of like Western alchemy, where we have the lead, which we want to turn into gold. So our base metal, which is ourselves, our impure selves, hold the truth that inside of us all is an enlightened being. It is perfect. Our energy centers are all aligned. Everything is absolutely perfect. That inner core, that inner being is just magnificent. And so the Buddhist teaching is very helpful. It illustrates that. It helps to unlock an understanding of other traditions too, because there are similarities there. And it gives a clue as to where to look.
What are some simple and straightforward ways to open up blocked energy centers?
The easiest way is get on your knees. Absolutely get on your knees. So the process that I spoke about earlier, where you get onto your knees, you stand up on your knees like that, and you swing your legs down and you connect to Mother Earth. It is the easiest, because what that will do is just send up an even flow of energy that moves up. And with that, all you need to do is just imagine each of the energy centers as a beautiful white ball. You don't even have to put a color to them. And the white ball just burns away any dark bits that you see. And then you bring up the next part and you open that up and you burn away. And you bring up to the next chakra, burn that away. And you bring up to the next one and burn that away. Until you get this beautiful white, clear channel. You know? And then you can get all fancy, you get sexy, circulate it around your energy fields. You can go mad, you know? Do all sorts of things, because where thought goes, energy goes. So you can really move energy around your field, and just watch where it goes, and you'll see, oh yeah, it goes around your energy field. So it kind of looks like a coffee bean, you know, frontwards and backwards too. So each of these aspects of your life, your feminine, your masculine, your past, your future, they all have an orbit where the energy travels, right? So you can send this energy up your center line, and then you can cycle it back down under your feet into the earth chakra, which is that root ball that I spoke about. And then you can send that beautiful white light back up again. And you can cycle that through, and that cleans out everything magnificently. It's a very, very beautiful practice. I recommend it. I recommend doing that. And there's not much that could go wrong either. It's fairly safe practice too. And you feel amazing afterwards.
Do your feet necessarily have to be touching the earth or grass, or is the visualization the more important aspect of it?
You can do it on the 52nd floor of the Empire State Building. It doesn't matter, because the interesting thing is your energy, you know, will follow your thought. So you will end up growing huge roots right down under the concrete pylons into Mother Earth. So it doesn't matter actually where you are, because just underneath you is Mother Earth. So the energy will take care of the distance. I find it very useful when I travel, and just before takeoff, I will do that. And then I will sink my feet into the ground. And then when we take off, I get less airsick, and I get less of a bump in my stomach when the plane takes off. So I find that very helpful, and I keep my feet in the ground the whole way. So if I'm traveling to Europe, in the sea, all the way to Europe, I drag my feet. So I stay connected the whole time. So yeah, there's no reason why you can't, even if you're in the space station.
Are there any books or resources that you'd recommend?
I recommend reading widely, whatever you can. So Eastern myth, Western myth. So read the Vedas, read Buddhist thought. In the Western tradition, if you're interested in that, then I recommend reading Parsifal, Hero's Journey. It's a fantastic story of a knight who goes through trials and tribulations and realizes that actually when he sets off into the forest, into the darkness, and asks what's wrong, and does what he thinks is the right thing to do, not what society tells him to do, then he finds the Grail King and he's able to heal the Grail King. So, and any of the Grail myths, actually, fantastic. Who else? Oh, there's so many authors who are fantastic. There are a lot of the occult authors. So Dion Fortune is fantastic. She's brilliant. She does a lot on psychic healing, psychic self-defense. She also does a lot on the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is very useful as well, because that deals with the energy Eliphas Levi, um, uh, Israel Regardie. Israel Regardie was a Kabbalist, and he was very well known for his work on the Kabbalah and Western traditional medicine, or Western traditional magic. Who else? Yeah, and also the Christian mystics. You know, there's a lot of interesting Gnostic stuff around. So Gnosticism is also very interesting. There's a lot of hidden divine feminine in Gnostic thought, which is really interesting. So those are just a few.
Robert, is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
I don't know if there are any questions that you would like to ask around traditional medicine or herbs or muti or anything like that.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about traditional herbs?
Yeah, so my tradition is very herb heavy, so muti heavy. We deal with a lot of traditional kind of muti medicines where we ask the plant medicine, so the plant spirit is then responsible for the healing. We ask them to help us to heal a particular ailment. So we'll speak to the plant spirit, say, if you're wanting to stop people from stealing your apples, right? Okay, so say you have an orchard and people come in and they steal your apples all the time. There's a fantastic medicine called Maime, which is stop. And that's Igqriha. And Igqriha, when he's in flower, there are these beautiful yellow flowers that just pop out of the bulb, and they've got these beautiful strap leaves. Yeah? And then just out of this comes this hand-shaped flower, and it just kind of stands there. You look at it, and you can only stop and admire them. And that is the magic behind the Maima, actually. So what you would do is you take the berries of the Maima. Some people take the bulb and they squash it up, crush it up, swish it in water, and you go early in the morning. So dawn is the best for Maima to work because he likes getting up early. And you take some twigs of your favorite medicine, your favorite herb. So say you want to stop people from stealing stuff, but you want an air of peace. So you would take olive leaves, because olive is a beautiful peacemaker. It's also a revealer. It opens everything out, which is why we use the olive for the ubalao. So it opens the medicine away. So we'll take that and we'll asperge all the way around the property, saying, Maima, please help to stop the theft, because you don't want to stop the person, you kill them. Maima is strong, So we don't want to kill people. We don't want to stop them, but we want to stop the behavior. We want to stop the idea of coming into your property and stealing your apples, right? Because that's not what you want. So we work on the behavior. So Maima, please stop the behavior. Please stop that stealing. Please stop the stealing. And people will stop being interested in your apples. And I've used it to stop noisy neighbors they will not stop them, but stop the noise from noisy neighbors coming through and bothering us. You see? So you've got to be very careful. You stop the noisy neighbors, chaos. But if you stop the noise, it's a different story. So that's one example of how muti works. The more specific you are, the better. Better than medicine works. So I used a lot of medicine like that. So it's all around particular behaviors, particular ailments where there's there is a dis-ease that needs to be moved, like a ghost, or tokolosh, which is an earth elemental, Dulu, which is also another elemental, but this one is a fire being, lightning being actually, sits on top of houses and on top of the trees, causes absolute chaos. So a lot of fighting, a lot of judgment is usually by those guys. So I use Haworthia medicine that you spray. Also, you plant, and that gets rid of them. There's another bush that I use as well, which I can't remember now. Anyway, so we use a lot of the medicines to kind of chase the disease out, take them back. Buffalo thorn is another very interesting medicine that I use a lot, and it is used to remove ghosts. And you'll find that a lot of people taking their dearly departed from Cape Town to the Eastern Cape, they will throw in some buffalo thorn, Ziziphus macronata. They'll throw that into the casket and then they'll send that there. So what that does is that keeps the spirit close to the body, stops the spirit from wandering. So that's a fantastic reset button. If you are plagued with ghosts, there's lots of knocking in the roof and there's lots of like noise and things get lost and it's chaos. Then I will crush up some of the bark and sprinkle it around the house. And when the ghost touches that, bam, reset, goes back to wherever they are buried. And they stay there. And they don't bother you again. So it's all that kind of myth. And by the way, in the Anglo-Bush War, the Anglo-Boer War, when the Zulu impis were attacked by the Boer, and also by the English as well, actually. I think it was mostly by the English. They would take the clivia, the maine, and a few other medicines, and they would wash in that. And the legend goes, the stories go, that the muskets would backfire on all the soldiers, or the bullets would bounce off or misfire or whatever. And a friend of mine, a year or two ago, said that he had some of the original mix from me. So I don't know if I would ever test that. But there are people who claim, that Maima works. Maima makes you bulletproof. I don't know if I would go that far. But hey, the guy who was giving it to me said, yeah, I know, he tested it. It's fine, it works. So I'd like to know how he tested it.
Speaking of which, are there any dangers, aside from the one you just mentioned, are there any dangers associated with herbs?
Very much so. Yeah. Some medicines are really poisonous. So there are a lot of medicines that are very poisonous that are used in everyday life, and you have to protect yourself from the effects of the toxicity. So one of the TB medicines that we use, which is Gardenia, which is the kraalbos, and that you have to mix with wilde als. Okay, specifically because wilde als protects your liver. When you are using medicines that can damage the eyes, then you would use the cabbage tree roots, and you would mix that in, and that would then mitigate the damage with your eyes. So a lot of people do that with Datura, Datura stramonium particularly. I wouldn't recommend that. So people want bangs and flashes and all the fireworks of plant medicines. I tend to be very cautious with the medicines that I give people. So I won't ever prescribe anything like that. So I'd never give anybody something that was hectically toxic like Datura or Herbal, which is the Bufani. Although I know that people do use it to see, specifically for diagnosis or early in the morning when there's no clouds, they would use it to see who stole their car. That's hallucinatory. So the Datura, that damages the eyes. The Herbal can kill you. It's really, really poisonous. A friend of mine in Joburg had a person who was, I think he was one of his students or one of his colleagues, ended up in hospital because he decided to use Herbal to diagnose, and he used too much. And yeah, he went into heart failure and they had to haul him off to hospital. So yes, plant medicines, because they are natural, doesn't mean that they are safe. A lot of them are really dangerous and they should be treated with respect. And the same goes with the plant spirit medicines. The spirits as well need to be treated with respect because they're also dangerous. They can also harm you and harm your loved ones around you. It's easy to irritate or manage a relationship with a plant spirit, and that's it. Marijuana is one of them. You've got to be careful. There needs to be a respect. So using the mother in a ceremonial way, not ever abusing the relationship. As soon as you abuse the relationship, then you end up with an out of control kind of addiction issue. Same with tobacco. Tobacco is also really dangerous. A lot of people who use tobacco ceremonially have a habit, So they need to look at their relationship with that, and where have they stepped over from respect to disrespect? Are they using it too often? Are they using it casually? Is it being used recreationally? How often has it become a problem? Has their life become unmanageable? These are all really good questions to ask when using muti, because it can so easily step from respect to disrespect. Plant spirits are quite sensitive to being disrespected, because we've disrespected Mother Earth for so many years. We've disrespected our brothers and sisters for so many years. So it's in us. We need to be mindful. We need to be aware that we are overstepping bounds, and we need to help build a relationship again with our medicines, not exploit them.
Where do psychedelics fall into the picture?
Psychedelics are a whole different story. So we don't use psychedelics at all, because essentially psychedelics are a way to open a portal. They open you up to a realm and they transport you there. So they are a vehicle. We do things a little bit differently. We have a medicine that opens the door and allows us to walk through to wherever we need to be. Psychedelics, particularly the strong ones, they throw you through a door and you end up wherever you end up. And that's the lesson that they are teaching you, sure, and it's a very wise lesson. But some people are not ready for it. And it can cause trauma, PTSD. Some people really struggle with being thrown through a door and being shown traumatic events that they are not ready to deal with yet. So I'm very cautious with psychedelics. And there are a lot of very, very gifted healers who use psychedelics in a very therapeutic, safe way. And they have that skill to help people through that doorway and deal with whatever it is that they have to deal with on the other side. Right? I don't have that skill. I haven't been trained to deal with that. And I think training is the absolute key. You need to be able to learn how to deal with that voltage, you know? That's three-phase voltage. We don't deal with three-phase here. You know, we deal with 220 volts. It's about the maximum we can. Yeah. So all of those people with three-phase training, I have deep respect for.
Robert, I think this is a good place to end.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. I had fun. I hope that what I said may help someone. Yeah, so fantastic. And
I trust it will.
yeah, I hope so. That is my wish. So thank you.